time to start a garden. I got a video series going up that starts with start a garden now. So, you know, in light of all the things that are happening right now on the planet, yes, start a garden now. So this is the last depiction that I had a video over, and review it quickly. You know, you don't want to do this. This requires too many inputs, and inputs are going to become in short supply. And on this side, we talked about a sustainable property that all of the elements require that are required for it to function are found in the property. Right now, the goal isn't to become 100% sustainable, but to work towards this goal and get as sustainable as possible. And whatever blanks that you have, that's when you team up with your neighbors to fill in those blanks. So as a community, you can become sustainable. So this next video, I gotta be careful here. My studio is clogged up with all kinds of things like cameras and tripods, and I got a knee right now that's going right through the tripod, so I can do this. I don't have a studio. Anyways, we want to go and talk about our sustainable system, a permaculture system based on permaculture zoning, and I just want to get this concept over to you so that you have the understanding. We're not going to fill in very many details because it's just, we can get bogged down in the details, and it's better. I mean, a lot of people are going to look at this series with all the problems that are occurring, and they have no idea of what to do or what permaculture is, and their brains are going to be in a rush, and it's just best to slow everything down, study the situation, think about every move. And to get this mainframe concept into your thinking before you act is going to be very important, because if you put elements out of place, you're going to have to do double work to replace them, maybe triple work. So we have to be thinking about this. So this is just depicting a flat piece of land, and I drew a circle, and we aren't going to be able to farm broad acres this way. This is a small plot, you know, your house and your yard sort of thing. If you can start fresh, you know, maybe it's a couple of acres. And we can grow a lot of food on a half an acre, not really close to what we all need, but can be a lot and can contribute to your food requirements in a pretty big way, especially your nutrient requirements if you're doing it the way I've been describing. Especially if you go into my composting series and you see all the elements I'm putting in the compost, which end up in the soil that your crops will be eating and growing from, and now all those elements are going to be in the crops, and that's nutrition, and that is good health. So we have this circle here, and I better get this up here a little farther, or bring the camera down. Like I said, I don't have a studio. And I'm here all by myself, so I don't have anybody looking over my shoulder. So in the center, let's just put our house in the center of the circle. All right, and the reason why I made it a circle is because it's an equal distance all the way around. We want to count our steps around the whole circle. We want to be counting our steps. We want to be figuring out what is it that we visit the most. We don't want to put our, say, our chickens at the very, if we have chickens or rabbits or whatever, we don't want to put it at the very end of our circle, because all the steps it's going to require, you got to visit those chickens at least twice a day. That's the way it works. So having this equal distance will help you to understand the concept of permaculture zoning. And we're just talking about a small place, so we're only talking about zone 1 and 2. And actually the house, you can almost put that as zone 0, and I've seen some other permaculturists that talk about the house being zone 0. And even Mollison might have said that. You know, there's a lot of information, you just can't get it all in your brain. Anyways, at least not me anyways. Anyways, let's say anyways. Let's talk about our driveway. We have a driveway coming in here, and we want to go back to our original video where I talk about the two most important elements. One is compost, the other is rainwater. And we want to have our composting operation at this driveway access. Because, and we don't want to have it next to the house because we're going to be bringing in manure if we don't have animals. And if we have a small space, we probably aren't going to be producing enough manure to have an ongoing composting operation. So you're going to bring manure and you're going to drive it up the driveway, and manure, when you get it fresh, is at its heaviest weight, and you don't want to be hauling that anywhere else other than next to the driveway. And then on the water side, you want to have the water being harvested off the roof as close as you can to that compost area. Now you're not hauling water great distances. So this is the beginning of your zoning. Is you're thinking first of where are you going to make the compost, how are you going to harvest, and where are you going to harvest the rainwater. You know, what is a gallon of water weighs like 7 pounds? Well, you times that by a 5-gallon bucket. And that's a lot of trips with a 5-gallon bucket. Now, if you don't have resources, this is what you're going to be having to do. If you have resources, then maybe you'll pipe some of that water to a tank that's near the composting area, because compost requires a lot of water. Of course, you're going to have gardens all over the place too, so if you have a tank here for your compost, that tank can also supply water for some of the other garden that's in this area. So to move along, let's go to our first zone, and you're going to probably measure 30 to 50 feet around the house. Okay, now we're assuming that there's no trees, there's no geographical features here. We're assuming that you can do circle around a square house on your land. You know, some houses are right up against the property line, so this is just a make-believe to learn about the concept. The reason why we got a 30 to 50 foot circle here is this is where your main kitchen garden is. And the kitchen garden are going to be the crops that you are going to use like every day. You know, lettuces and radishes, and you know, these are crops that you're going to be incorporated into your meals all the time. And they're the tenderest crops, the crops that need the most care. You're going to be close to them. You'll be able to care for them. So that would be considered zone 1. Okay. And you want to think about some other things too. Let's bring other influences into the picture here too, because it's going to be important for these main concepts, for the main concept to be enacted on your property. So one of them, I don't have a yellow pen, but one of them is the sun. You want to know what the track of the sun is going to be and where the shade is going to be on your property, the shading in the sun. So if this is the main track of the sun coming up around here, I have to bring this back out a little bit. Okay. Right, if that's the main track of the sun and it rises and sets. I'm not an artist. Actually, it kind of looks funny anyway. You're going to be thinking, okay, the sun is going to be on this side of the house, and you're going to have a little microclimate there. It's going to thaw out a little faster if you're in a cold climate, or it's going to warm up a little more in a cold climate during the summer. You're going to be thinking about, well, you know, maybe that's a good place for some tomato plants to be up against that wall, or maybe that's where you're going to start your lettuce seeds right away in the spring. You're going to think about that. On the opposite side is going to have the most shade, so you might want to plant crops that like a little more shade. Maybe you're just going to line it up with some ribes or something, some bushes right along the house. Okay, so you want to think about that. And the other is you want to think about the wind. And where I am in a cold climate, I'm thinking about the cold wind. And shielding some of my more sensitive crops, the ones that want more heat, with wooden fencing from the cold wind, which here would be the north, northwest, northeast. So some of my gardens, I have wooden borders on the north side to protect the crops from that cold wind. It's amazing how you can walk out, or at least it's amazing how I walk out into my backyard, and if I kind of lay down next to those fences, it's just amazing how warm it is right next to the ground. And I stand up in it and I immediately get cold. So it definitely has an effect. So you want to think about these two major influences as well. So now I've added to the compost and the water, I've added two other influences that you want to be thinking about. Where does the cold wind come from? Where does the sun? Now if you're in a hot arid climate, it's actually, everything is opposite. Now you're thinking about, we want to protect from the hot wind and from the sun. So all is dependent on climate, geography, and all these little micro influences that we have to think about. Okay, then let's talk about this as being zone 2. In zone 2, you're going to have, it's going to be mainly the main crop garden. These are crops that take all year to grow. They're bulk foods, like potatoes. Maybe you have room for some grains. Definitely going to have to grow grains if you've got some chickens on, because you'll be able to feed your chickens. In my main crop gardens, I'm growing a lot of perennials, where I'm using the perennials for my compost. Yeah, it's an ingredient. In this spot, and you're gonna, and it would be smart to incorporate productive bushes and small trees into your main crop garden setting, thinking about the sun, thinking about the wind. So the sun, we don't want to be shading on our main crops that need a lot of sun, but there are main crops that can deal with as little as 6 hours of sun. So we want to be thinking about where are we going to put these trees. And what I've done in the back is I do have a few blocks or groupings. Maybe I could have been a little more diversified in terms of where I put these. Instead of kind of concentrating them together, I could have maybe mixed them up a little more. But when I first started, I wasn't totally aware of all of this. It still isn't too bad. For instance, I've got a block of hazelnuts back there, and I've got fruit trees growing in amongst the hazelnuts. Well, maybe I should have put hazelnuts more everywhere than just in that block with some fruit trees in it. Well, there's also some ribes in there, and there's also some grapevines, and I guess I got a couple sea berries for nitrogen fixation. So it is kind of a polyculture, but I do have the hazelnuts concentrated together. So I guess that's long enough for this video. We'll see what I come up with next, but appreciate that you are watching. Oh, one other thing, just real quick. If we don't have a circle, if we don't have flat land, and let's say there's a deep ridge next to your place, well then your zoning will reflect that steep ridge. You don't want to include that. You don't want to be walking up and down that all the time. You want to be putting that into a zone 3, zone 4, zone 5 setting. So all we're talking about is zones 1 and 2. Okay, got that? Okay, again, thanks for watching.